Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ivy Cove Furniture. Today I am going to be redoing this super cute mid-century modern dresser I found at one of my local thrift shops. I love this place because they put their furniture at one price, and if it doesn't sell in like 2 weeks, they lower it by 25%, and if it doesn't sell within like 3 weeks, they lower it to 50%. This piece actually hadn't met that 50% range yet, but it was only $60, so I figured it would be worth it. The very first thing I do whenever I'm inspecting a piece of furniture at a thrift shop is I check all of the drawers to make sure all of the tracks are working properly and none of them are broken or need to be replaced. This is a big thing for me because I hate replacing drawer tracks, so if I have to replace a drawer track, I typically won't buy the piece of furniture. And this one also has a brand on it, and it's Drexel, which is really awesome for the resale value. And this is a true mid-century modern. That is the hardware. It's all solid wood, and it was in really great condition other than the top. To begin, I'm going to use some of this Gorilla wood glue to glue down the tongue and groove on one of my drawers. It didn't seem like it was messed up when I purchased it, but when I took it out, it kind of was really loose, so I just separated it. I'm going to put it back together like a puzzle and just load it up with some wood glue. Next step is to clean out the piece. Because I did pick this up from a thrift store, I don't have any idea where it was, but there was a lot of like residue on the inside, so I cleaned the insides of the drawers, the outsides of the drawers, the entire inside and outside of the dresser. Usually I'll run my shop vac through to suck up anything that's loose, and then I'll wipe it down with some all-purpose cleaner or antibacterial spray. I also ended up using some Dawn dish soap as well, just because there was kind of a funky smell in there and it didn't sit well with me. So I did use some Dawn dish soap and water. It was an antibacterial soap as well. Next, I just want to touch up this incredible original hardware with some gold spray paint. I really love this Rust-Oleum brand, the Gold Flush spray paint. It always looks really nice when it comes out, and spraying the hardware is such an easy way to freshen up the hardware without having to replace all of it. After looking at the piece for a few minutes, I decided that I wanted to sand down all the drawer faces and leave them natural, and then I was just going to basically paint the outside of the dresser. So that is what I'm doing now. I'm using a 120 grit sandpaper to take off all of the finish, and I think it was the perfect grit for these drawers. It wasn't too abrasive. Sometimes I think using anything less than like a 120 or like a 100 grit can actually be a little bit harder to get the finish off. But in this case, the 120 was perfect, and then I did take a 220 and I went back over it just to smooth it out and close up the pores a little bit more. I'm using my Bondo glazing spot putty. Like a wood filler, you can use it on chipped veneer. It's made more so for fine lines and cracks and things like that, but I think it sands down better than wood filler, so I tend to try to use it for things like this. I love using Bondo, but Bondo can be difficult to work with and it dries really fast. And for smaller little ding areas like this, I think the spot putty works great. You can sand it down really flush and it looks natural, as opposed to the wood filler. For some reason, whenever I work with wood filler, it just always looks really porous. For this piece, I'm going to be using the color Vintage Duck Egg by Dixie Belle. This is a really, really beautiful color. It was kind of retro, so I thought that it would go really well with this super retro dresser. So you can see how thick the consistency of the paint is. I typically always spray down my paint and my brushes before I use chalk paint. with the silk mineral paint. If you've used that by Dixie Belle yet, it's amazing. And it's very thin, so you don't have to water it down. But the chalk paint, I would definitely suggest a little bit of a spritz before you start painting. Damp your brushes a little bit, just because it's going to help your paint spread farther and it's going to give you less streaks. As you can see there, I did have some clumping because I didn't pay attention when I was doing the top part. Always want to make sure you've got your drips taken care of before your paint dries, otherwise it's going to clump on the sides, which is what just happened. So when I went to record the front of the dresser, that little frame, it did not record, so that's why we jumped from the top of the dresser all the way to the side of the dresser. But this is one coat. I mean, this is one coat of this Dixie Belle vintage duck egg, and the coverage is so beautiful. It goes on so well. I didn't spray it down enough, so I actually probably could have gotten more for from my paint, but I didn't spray it down a whole lot. I think it's really important, especially to spray down on your second coat, because you're painting over porous paint and it's just absorbing everything. So I will spritz it down pretty thin on my second coat and it'll still cover. I always like to brush in one general direction. This way all my brush strokes are staying in the same direction and it just gives it a much smoother finish and a nice cleaner look. Not so shabby, but it also is, it helps in the end if you want to go back and sand it down and smooth it out even more. It just, to me, looks so much cleaner and more put together than, that brushing all in all different directions. And I understand that the logic behind that is to make sure that you cover all of your, surface and you haven't missed anywhere. But typically, as long as you're using, 2 coats, you're not going to have any thin spots. All your spots are going to be covered anyway. So I wouldn't really worry too much about that. The brush I am using is a 2-inch round brush. It's a natural bristle brush. And these are my favorite brushes to use because they hold a ton of paint. So I don't know if you guys caught that. I always do offload my first stroke of paint, just because when I'm painting, I don't want a ton of paint on my brush. So I'll kind of dab it in and then kind of wipe it off a little bit if I have too much on there, and then go back and kind of blend it in. When you're painting, you want to think of it as you're blending your makeup. So you want to blend your paint in together, not necessarily just slab it on, because then it will get really streaky. And the heavier your paint, the more deep your strokes are going to be. We want nice, light pressure, light strokes so that you don't get a lot of, brush strokes in your overall finish. Okay, I know this looks crazy, but I'm telling you, it works. I could not for the life of me get this knob off, and I knew I wanted to use it. I wanted to get the dresser done, and so normally if I have to get a piece of hardware off, I'll call my boyfriend and, he'll come and work it out whenever he can, but I didn't want to have to wait, so this was the next best option. I just covered the entire front of the drawer around the knob, and then I'm going to spray the knob. I used way too much paper, but you get the gist of what I was trying to do there. Now I'm taking a 600 grit sandpaper. I'm going to sand down the top and the sides and make the dresser completely smooth, because I just really like a smooth finish rather than that chalky matte feeling. So a 600 or a 400 grit will do great for smoothing out your finish. The final step for me is putting on the wax, and I'm using the Bare Top Coat Wax. You can get this at Home Depot for $15, and it's usually really easy to find, so that's why I like it. I never usually have to dig for it. So this is the final product. I absolutely love this dresser. I listed this on Marketplace and was able to sell it, I think, the very same night I posted it. and I sold it for $400, and it just looks so retro and beautiful with that blue color and the exposed wood with the original gold hardware. So let me know what you guys think in the comments and tell me if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to my channel.